Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Black-eyed girl in the park. My friend and I are walking around my neighborhood at night cause we were really bored. We passed this park that's in my neighborhood and we heard singing. So we looked over at the park and saw a little girl all alone sitting on a swing. She had long brown hair, a pink polka dot dress and a red bow in her hair. We couldn't see her super well at first because the park wasn't super well lit. So we kept walking past the park because we felt this overwhelming fear when we saw her without any cause. But as we were walking, still looking at her, she turned her head and stopped singing. She was singing Ring Around the Rosie. We were walking a bit faster at that point. But I felt drawn to her. Even though I had this overwhelming fear, I also felt like I should go to her, but I fought that, and I kept walking. She then stood up from the swing and started walking. When she walked out towards the street, which we were on the other side of, she went under the street light. Then I saw it. I made clear eye contact with her, and her eyes were pitch black. She then started to run towards us, which only my friend noticed because I was caught up in looking at her eyes. My friend grabs my arm, pulls me and yells, "Book it." We start running as fast as we can down the street. As soon as we got to my porch and my mom came outside, we turned around and she was just gone. After that I had sleep paralysis of her just standing in my room staring at me with her dark eyes. I had a dream about her and always felt some sort of presence around me, but I never actually saw her out there again. But anytime I'm outside at night I always feel an extremely strong fear of seeing her again. CH.
B.E.K encounter, Fulton County, Pennsylvania. It was the day after Christmas 2013, and we decided to get out of the house and take a walk. We enjoy walking the trails at Hound's Gap State Park here in Fulton County, Pennsylvania. It wasn't too cold, so we decided to take the short drive to the park. The park is void of people in the winter, unless there's snow for skiers and ice skating on the lake. But we were alone, at least, we thought we were alone. We were walking on a trail that passes several of the rental cabins. After a while, we took a short break and sat down at a picnic table located in a cabin pavilion. We were discussing how quiet it was when I noticed 4 children walking towards us. As they approached, I noticed that their eyes, especially the taller and older boy, were very dark with larger eyes. There was, I believe, 2 boys and 2 girls of various ages. All 4 wore light jackets. When they reached us, the older boy asked, "Do you live here?" My husband answered, "No, this is a rental cabin." There was no reaction. One of the girls, who was very pale, reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes and lit one. The girl was no older than 10 years. My husband asked her, "Aren't you too young to smoke?" The girl looked at him and, I swear, her eyes got darker and larger. She gave him a scowl that he and I will remember for the remainder of our lives. It was so vile and foreboding. I was immediately scared. Then they turned, on a dime and together, and started to walk away. I was speechless and shaking. My husband said, "Let's go." We briskly walked in the opposite direction towards the car. I was still very frightened and wanted to go straight home. We pulled out onto Alwick Road and headed east towards home, which is only a half mile or so from the park. A few days later, we were driving to Chambersburg to do some shopping. We needed to first stop at the post office in Fort Loudoun to mail a few packages. My husband walked into the post office while I sat in the car. After a few minutes, I noticed the same 4 kids walking through the post office parking lot. Just seeing them sent chills up and down my spine. When my husband returned to the car, I told him what happened and that I wanted to go home immediately. Since that time, I have suffered terrible episodes of anxiety and fear. My doctor has prescribed medication, but I still panic that I'll encounter those kids again. Can you suggest some recourse? I'd like to discuss this with you. LD.
Black-eyed kids encounter in Santa Fe. It was an October evening, not too far off from Halloween. Live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The evening was slowly creeping by, so I decided to go to the corner store. It was only 3 blocks, shouldn't be much trouble, right? During my walk I see the occasional person putting up Halloween decorations and kids playing in their yards, but this story is about something far more sinister. I remember seeing two teens about age 14 knocking on a door asking to use the phone, which of course I thought was weird because most teens these days have phones. As I kept walking, they stopped and stared at me for a short moment. I felt the blood in veins chill. I felt so creeped out I hurried to the next block. The next block seemed fine until I looked behind me and saw the two teens were following me. I took off sprinting to the store at this point. I saw the sign for the store and relief washed over me. I opened the door and I told the cashier about what happened on the way here. He looked at me slightly creeped out and told me a story about this happening to him in his hometown and how they found him the day he left and asked for his help in an emotionless voice, and he told me to never agree to help. He told me another story, but at that point I was no longer paying attention because they were standing at the door asking to be let in. The cashier freaked out and locked the door. The teens never seemed to waver or leave. They wouldn't step away from the door. It had been an hour. The cashier and I were ready to fight our way out, but instead he took me out the back. The one teen came around the back just as the door shut behind us. He said, "Can you help me?" He was closing in on us, and his eyes. They were black as a starless night. They were peering right into my soul. I couldn't help but gaze into his eyes. The terror, I can't remember too much of what happened next, but I do recall the sounds of struggle. When I came to, the cashier was struggling with both teens. He was calling out to me for help. I ran towards them, grabbed him by his collar and pulled him between the two, and knocking them over in the process. I didn't look back until I was near my house. The cashier was gone, but the teens were still following behind. I ran into my house, closed all the blinds, and turned the music up. I tried to find and thank the cashier for saving my life that day, but he didn't show up to work after that. I asked his boss, and he told me he called over the phone and quit. He said he was moving. To this very day I sometimes feel the fear of those eyes watching me as I drive to work. I sometimes will look out my window and swear I see them watching my house from a couple blocks away, waiting for their next chance. BB.
Black-eyed kids Hound, Huntsville, Alabama neighborhood. One evening in 2014, I was in my living room reading. It was around 2:30 a.m., and my dog went to the door like he had to go out. I started to get up and he started growling at the door. He has never growled at anything in his life. He was only 6 months old. Then my other dog jumped up on the couch, trembling and whining. She was a year old. Needless to say, this unnerved me, since I was reading about creepy stuff, including B.E.K, and was already a little freaked out. So, I just sat back on the couch and held my older dog, trying to calm her down. Then came a knock on the door. Usually, my dogs go wild, barking and whining excitedly because they love people, but my 6-month-old puppy ran away from it and came over by me. At this point, my heart was racing and I was just terrified. All the lights in my house were off and the curtains were drawn. I don't have a peephole, so I peeked out through the blinds of the window behind me that overlooked the porch. There were 2 boys standing there. One looked to be around maybe 5, he was really little, and the other one was about 10, I'd say. They had their heads down and were wearing winter clothes, heavy jackets. I thought this was weird because it's in the summer. Then, they both turned to look up at me. I don't have a bulb in my porch light, so I couldn't see their faces, but they looked directly at the window. This freaked me out even more, so I moved away from the window and just sat on my couch. I couldn't believe that this was happening. I had heard that if you knew about them, then they would visit you, and I just kept trying to convince myself that these were just some young kids playing a prank or something, that this wasn't really happening. However, this felt very real. Then one of them spoke. It sounded like it may have been the older one. "Ma'am, can you let us in? It's really cold out here and my brother is hungry." I didn't move, didn't reply. I was immediately alarmed because I had no idea how they knew I was a ma'am. I just sat there on my couch. The voice sounded void of emotion and a lot more calmer and somehow older than the little person talking. What the hell would 2 young kids be doing out at this time of night anyway? Plus, it's June in Alabama, it isn't cold by any means. I felt this overwhelming sense of dread and knew if I opened the door, something awful would happen. I had read the stories and I thought, nope, not gonna answer the door, F this. It was really weird though, because no matter how scared I was, and how none of this made sense, I almost felt compelled to go to the door. Like, I had an urge to help them. I suppressed it the best I could and ignored them anyway. Then the same voice said, "Ma'am, please let us in. I saw you through the window. I know you're there. It will only take a moment." I was like, okay, WTF moment? What kid says that? I was frozen in fear and just refused to answer them at all. I waited for them to go away and didn't dare look out my window because I just knew they were right next to it and would be staring back at me with pitch black eyes. Then, after a few seconds of silence, they started pounding on my window and I heard the same voice again. "Let us in please, it's cold and we have to call our mom. She will be worried if we don't call her." I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. It sounded just like what happened in all the stories I've been reading. At this point I was almost in tears. I was so freaked out. My heart felt like it was gonna bust out of my chest. I still stayed silent and didn't answer the door. I just sat back against the arm of my couch and held my legs up to my chest. There was no way I was answering that freaking door. I stayed that way for about half an hour, until I was sure they were gone and everything was quiet. My dogs at this point had run into my room, and I had to go get them out and hold them because I was just terrified and needed some kind of comfort. I never saw these kids' eyes. I have no idea for sure if they were black-eyed kids, but I definitely believe that they were. I grabbed my phone and called my friend who had suggested I read the stories and woke her up and begged her to come stay the night with me. After I told her what happened, she agreed right away. About 15 minutes later, she still wasn't here. I started to get worried because she only lives on the next street over. It should have taken her not even 5 minutes to get here. Then at that point, I saw headlights in my driveway and looked out the window. I saw her get out of her car and run to my door, banging on it. I let her in immediately, and she was crying, had this terrified look on her face, and said, "You aren't gonna believe this, but I swear to God I just encountered the two kids you told me about." She said she was at a stop sign and checked her phone for a second when this kid knocked on her window. It startled her, so she looked up and strangely, the streetlights were out so she couldn't see his face, but there was another younger kid behind him. She cracked the window, already apprehensive, and said, "Can I help you?" And the kid said, "Give us a ride," in a demanding, overly confident voice for a child. She didn't say anything, and the kid stepped toward her car, and he was close enough now that she noticed he had jet black eyes, wall-to-wall black, no white. She said she wanted to drive away immediately, but felt like she was being pulled into his stare, almost opening her door before she snapped out of it, but she didn't. She gunned the gas pedal and went straight to my house. We stayed up the rest of the night. According to the stories, they usually pay you more than one visit, so I'm gonna take a ton of melatonin and knock myself out tonight to try to sleep right through, in case they decide to come again. Believe me or not, this really happened. On Stevens Avenue in 5 Points. Right here in Huntsville. Lock your doors and windows and ignore any child that comes to your door asking for help, especially if it's at night. OS.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.